the Tru-Mon show again. Yeah. Great. Give thanks for life. We're back for another Tru-Mon show. I'm very happy to be with Arthur and Fiona and Scott again tonight. How are you guys? First?
Good.
Yeah.
Great.
Well.
Acknowledge your presence. I'm not alone, and that's what we have to do. Meet life with full presence and power. So we're here with full presence and power to talk about the good-hearted people, because there is so much wonderful people out there, so much good-hearted people, but that are stuck in a cage that cannot break free from that cage. That was my case. I was in a cage for a long, long time, and then suddenly I decided to break free from that imposed. I think it's a self-imposed cage a lot, because you can break free at any moment. So they're not coming at your door to impose a cage on you. You impose it. The self-oppression, the self-thing, the self-obsession, oppression, everything is so potent in us that prevents us from breaking free from that cage, that living cage that we're in. So Arthur has an analogy to start to tell us about that. So I'm going to let him...
Well, we touched on these themes a little bit during these series that we've been having for the last, what is it now, 5 weeks, or how many shows we've had in the last 6 weeks, whatever. But I was talking to my daughters yesterday. I actually woke up. We had a long day out in the garden, and but I felt this weight, and I usually go through this. I go through periods where I feel this, like this heaviness around me. And I know it's not mine, it was what was dumped on me as a little kid. And I've always fought to resist this weight of, it's a form of oppression that can lead to repression and depression. In my case, it'll lead me to rage and anger, because that's my way of fighting out. And that's how I used to cope, as that survival mechanism as a kid growing up. But I got this motivation yesterday to go and talk to my 3 youngest daughters, because the oldest one's traveling overseas, and I was talking about how the good-hearted makes prisoners of everybody. And my youngest one, I asked her, are you comprehending this? She's Xanthi, you might have seen a few times when she flicks that into this screenshots when we do these shows, but she said, no, I don't comprehend it. I said, okay. So I thought about this for an instant, and I said, okay. So I came up with this analogy, and I explained it to another way. I said, and what I'm going to share is sort of how I explained it to her in front of the other 2 girls. I said, now imagine I'm a good man, or there's a good man with a very good heart, but he wants all the animals to be kept in a place where he can have them all the time. And so he built a cage, and he put all the birds and all the other creatures, it was a very big cage, put them all inside it. And all the creatures could see through the cage. They can see outside the cage, but they can't get there. And these creatures had no other choice but to learn to live inside this cage with this good man with a good heart, who thought he was doing the right thing. And then the creatures would have their babies, and then their babies would grow up in this cage too. And they would grow and be able to fly around and run around and see through the cage and see how things are outside the cage, but they don't know what it is to be living outside that cage. And so I sort of explained it to Xanthi that this is the way the system is, the way we live today. We're surrounded by good people with good hearts everywhere you go. And I was thinking about in these garden projects we're doing, getting ourselves into the system of spring and all the preparation work. And I got talking to some neighbors, and I get pretty passionate about things, and started getting into a little bit of this humus, because they were chopping, had machines, big machines here, chopping things down, and it was very noisy and getting rid of things outside their front yard. And I went over and had a look at their soil, and I saw all the humus was there in the soil, which we never had. So we spent 2 years out the front garden building the humus, which was intense work for us, on and off, because the garden grew on top of a clay belt. We had grass growing on top of clay, and so it was scattered grass, and when it rained, it was just mess. We never had anything. So this last 2 years, we worked hard to build up the humus, And when I went across the road, because they've been chopping down all these native trees that were planted 15 years ago by the original people who built the house across the road, I put my hand down and I could go down almost a foot, and I noticed, wow, look at the humus here. And here they are scraping it all up and getting all the organic matter that was being pulled up with it and dumping it on these trucks. And I'm turning around and say to them, you should keep all this organic matter. I get you're going to recreate your garden here, but don't throw away all this organic matter, and just cover it all up with mulch and put some carbon on top, and just until you're ready to do your planting, whatever you're going to do. And I got the feeling that they just didn't want to know anything about it, and they sort of fobbed me off a bit. That was fair enough, but and I was thinking, you know, these are really good people. They're really good-hearted people, but they love their cage. They love to fuck things. And here I've been working on waking up to realize how critical the humus is, because the humus is directly our immune system, because the humus bears all the fungi, all the bacterial-based information, and with it all the microbes. And they exposed the ground. And I learned from the gardening here, and when Aidan was here and Scott was here, and all the things we've been experiencing, and how things can become infertile, how you can make soil become not good soil, even though we think we're doing the right thing, by not learning how nature works and how the forest canopies work. When the forest drops its leaves and drops its branches, and all that's breaking down, and it forms that humus, and as long as we don't interfere, the baby powder of humus, because it's like baby powder. When you put your hand in real humus, it's really soft. It's like baby powder. And you can just feel this. And I'm trying to tell them, you guys have got yourself some really damn good humus here. But they left the whole ground open. And I said, look, we're happy to help you tomorrow morning. We go to the local co-op and bring all the materials back, and we'll help you cover it all up and protect it all until you're ready to do your planting. Then you can just, put your fences up, whatever, because they want to put fences up, and you can still do all that and drop your plants in, and you still got wonderful humus that is going to help the boom of whatever you planted. I just left yesterday. I left it all open in the sun. We had a lovely sunny day. We're just sitting there all exposed. They came back late in the afternoon, whacked a bit of hose all over it, and I'm thinking, oh God. And I'm thinking, look, I'm not trying to write them off. That's just where they're at, and they're going to create problems for themselves down the line until they fix again the loss of all the microbes and whatever is going on in that microbial world in the soil. And I was talking, and this sort of leads me back to this thing I was talking to my daughters about, that you imagine there's a man who wants everyone to be slaves in the system. And originally in the system, it was an overt system. So the cage was overt. It wasn't a cage as such made by bars or anything, or invisible things. It was made by men who are soldiers, legions, and the whole administrative coming down lines from the admirals, generals down through to the lackeys of their legions. And so, like, if the Roman Empire came in and they conquered, they would have this thing called Pax Romana, where the defeated tribe would surrender to the Romans and then learn to coexist with the Romans' domination peacefully. And we call that a Pax Romana. And the Pax is a peace treaty, but it's not really peace. It's still, the tribe is under a war. It's a conquered tribe who live to survive the circumstances that they're in. Now, we are all in the system under a Pax Romana today. There is everybody's in the system is in a war zone under Pax Romana by the Freemasons, the high-level occultists, who manipulated soldiers, men, the navies, the military, and their missionaries, their botanists, scientists, surveyors, you name it, who came on the lands of all the of the tribes of man on the land, and did their mapping out of everything that needed mapping out, from the lands, their customs, etc. And then they sent in their warships and armies in to decimate these tribes. And what remained of them were then educated into a covert, invisible prison. But pre this kind of attitude, this kind of intent to create an invisible cage for the good-hearted, because all the tribes are good-hearted, all the soldiers on all sides are all good-hearted, everyone's got a good heart. They all think they're doing the right thing. And so what you have originally there would have been a man who dreamt to manipulate men of his tribe and women to raise up an army. Now, the army might not be carrying weapons at that point, but enough to think, God, we've got to go and deal with this other tribe who are becoming a perceived threat to them. So they may have gone in there and attacked that tribe and conquered them because they didn't want them to come and take their land one day, because they already had this kind of inculcation, this kind of suggestive stuff already put in their heads. So they're doing what they think is the right thing to do. So in conquering another tribe, they then had their own soldiers, that had their Pontius Pilate, their administrative control over what we now call Palestine, right? Back then, it was not Palestine. It would have been, I don't know what those tribes are called back then, but you would have had the Jews and all this sort of stuff that is labeled, you know, as those under the thumb of the Romans. And then you had the high priests of those cultures, Sanhedrin and all that, the Magi and all that, and they coexisted in their books, they tell us, with the Romans, right? And so I don't see this as any different, where when that system collapsed, that overt system collapsed, where the cage was no longer about military control outright, where everybody's in the Pax Romanus, it then changed to a Pax Romanus under a covert method through the invisible cages of our education, and how we're conscripted into dancing the emotions of the languages we now call English, or any alphabet language, that forms this invisible cage. Welcome to the mental asylum. Welcome to the darkness of your heart. Welcome to the mental asylum. Welcome to the darkness of your heart. And now I was explaining this to Xanthi. I didn't go to this long-winded thing. I just sort of said, look, you imagine an invisible cage where all the creatures are trapped inside it. They can still see outside, but this cage is invisible. And they don't think they can get outside the cage. And there are animals who want to break away. They build up inside them. And I said, this is what your dad goes through. I get frustrated. I get built up, and I have this thing. I don't want to live inside this cage. And all this emotion comes up me because I remember as a kid growing up, I rebelled and rebelled and rebelled and want to break away. I want to break away. I want to break away from this thing, you know. And I was telling the kids, look, you haven't got a crazy dad in your life. You've got a dad who's been deeply compromised, who's had all kinds of issues because he's never been happy, never been peaceful with the shit that I've been living amongst. And it's only been in recent times that I've made sense of what really's been going on. And so I said, you imagine all these creatures like birds being brought up inside an invisible cage controlled by a man who doesn't want the creatures to come out and break away from the cage. And then they have their chicks, their lambs and ponies and all that sort of stuff. And they grow up to live inside this invisible cage. And I said, is this the right thing to do? And, you know, my Xanthi said, no, it's not. I said, well, what do you think we should be doing? He says, well, we've got to let them all out. And I says, well, what about your life inside this cage that we're in now? How do we let each other out of this, you know? And so she's contemplating on this now. She's actually, since yesterday, and I come and I just poke a few things, said, how do we get out of this cage, honey? I mean, you go to school, we go and watch some of our elder ones go and play soccer, you know, but that sport's inside the cage. The school's inside the cage, honey. You know, when you go shopping, it's inside the cage. When you go inside to the movies and watch the movies, you're inside the cage. When you go to the swimming pool and laugh with your friends, you're all inside the cage. How do you all get outside this cage?
That's why we put our groceries in a cage too.
Yeah,
everything is in a cage, and it's an invisible cage. But the thing was, I instilled in my daughters that everybody has a good heart. Everyone has a good heart, and yet it's all with a good heart that are keeping up this cage, because they all want the cage. They all want it. And it wouldn't matter now. Right now, when we talk to people, everyone who's listening to this, they are good-hearted slaves. They're all in a cage, and they want the cage. They really want it. That's why they wake up and go to bed inside the cage. We're still in it. This man's still battling to stay outside this cage. I've still got a wife who's in the cage. I've got children inside the cage. This man is still inside the cage, but he's not of the cage anymore. I dropped everything with the Pax Romanus. I'm not under Pax Romanus with the conquerors of the tribes of my original ancestors. You know, I'm outside that now. I really am. So, you know, they're going to have to come out over it now to come after me. I mean, they've already tried to poison me. They've probably, God knows what they've tried to find their methods of stealth to get at people like this man. I'm not the only one. I'm sure there's others out there across Earth who have broken away from this Pax Romanus. But it is this whole invisible cage is full of people with good hearts who dream for freedom, who dream for do no harm, who dream for all the sentiments of our heart. But they themselves, like the neighbors across the road with wrecking that the humus, they love their prison. They love it so much. They don't know how else to be. They are the chicks that were brought up by their parents who are already trapped inside this invisible cage, and their brains are hardwired to live only inside the cage. They don't know how it is to even think outside the cage. And if someone like me comes along, just even my presence rattles their cages. Just the ambience of this man's essence presses buttons with so many people, because this man is not of Pax Romanus. This man is not in a peace treaty with the conquerors of the occultists. I have no peace treaty. It's their war, not mine, and I am not their slave.
Interesting. I talk to people sometimes about birds, keeping birds in cages, and they will tell you, oh, but when they're hand raised, when you hand raise a bird, and if you hand raise a bird, they don't have to be in a cage all the time. They can fly around your house and, you know, be out of the cage except at night or whatever. And they say they've never known any different. And I always want to say, so what if you could bring up a child inside a house and never let that child outside the house and say, well, they've never known any different. It's the same. It's that strange thing we get where we say, oh, we love an animal, but we're going to keep it imprisoned for all of its life because it won't mind, because it won't know any different. And yet you've got an earth full of men and women, most of whom have inside somewhere this this discomfort with what's going on Earth, and this feeling that things aren't right. So, and we've all been brought up inside that cage, but we still have that feeling that things aren't right. So how can we assume that if you bring a bird up in a cage all its life, it's not going to know, have a sense of something wrong? The same with animals kept in, you know, cages.
Well, that's
all
the
time.
difference between this man and most of the brothers I've ever met in my life. This man has always fought against it. Must have been a nightmare to my mother and a nightmare to the schools, because I was always rebelling and constant rebelling, and I've always been contrary quite a lot. And I noticed that in my youngest one, Xanthi, she's very contrary too, and she seems to carry that kind of firepower that this man carries. I've had a marriage with Fiona, who has loved her cage, and she's gradually come to see the cage, and she's breaking away. When the issues happened with Macquarie Bank 11, 12 years ago, there was a fire that just amplified in the man. The fire was always there, but this man, it was like going to war, but it wasn't a war. It was the confrontation with the invisible cage and exposing it, and then begin to spread these insights to other brothers and sisters to get them to break out of these cages, so they don't force this man's children to remain inside this invisible cage. So this is what I was talking to my daughters about yesterday, and pointing out to them that I'm not a madman in that way. I've got a good heart just like anyone else. I just do things very differently because of the nature of the system that we're in. And everywhere I turn, I have people in a cage, and they are educated slaves, and all they dream is the cage, because the language is the cage. The language they talk keeps them as the cage. It's the fabric of the cage, and they don't have a single dream. And this is what I've been instilling in my daughters, and I'll again bring it up probably today or the next few days. I'll bring it again, that there's not a single dream that you have that is yours, that you've created, because if you did, you're already outside the cage. You're not under the Pax Romana. You're out of it, and you're not under their authority. But because the English language is so instilled that the conversations within conversations within conversation, and the depth of the conversations that one has through alphabet languages continue to keep them in the cage of this invisible cage. Now, for a lot of you who may have not watched all the series, when you go back and watch this series of videos we've been putting up, there's so much background already covered, which we're not going to bring up in this show today. But what I'm wanting to instill here is that unless we create dreams that are unique to us, we will be under a Pax Romana. And it wouldn't matter what you talk about. I don't care who you are, what you are, where you live, you're a fucking slave. And you will want me to be your slave in your system. That's why we all watch these shows. It's only educated slaves who come to watch and listen to this man talk to you. There would be no audience for this man if there was no Pax Romana. This man would be dead silent, because there'd be no internet, there'd be no electricity, there would be no one sitting around talking about freedom of conscience, because they're already being it and living it, because that's their living dream. They're not inside an invisible cage. But the reality is, in this 11, 12 years of the Love for Life work, I've been dealing with people in a cage. And that's all I've been dealing with. And in doing it, I'm seeing the levels of what happened to this man from a little boy, and how much this little boy fought and fought and fought against him. And this man's still alive, even with the assassination attempts and everything they've done to this man. The ability to use the sense to step outside and anticipate what they want to do, they still haven't been able to defeat this man, and they never will. Even if this man's body was laid to rest, this man has not died. Now, the point I'm telling you is not to glorify the man, but unless we have the firepower to stand up to this, you will never, ever, ever win this. You will never win this war. It is a war, but it's not our war. But unless you have the ability to fucking stand up and fight against this and break away, you are already defeated, no matter your sentiments of your heart. Your good heart will keep you in the prison, and you will never, ever break away, ever. There's something much more going on here.
I have a question for you.
My children are warriors. I'm try showing them. You do not fight with guns and weapons. You fight with your mouth. You fight with the spirit of your heart, and you confront and you smash the invisible prisons, even if they run away from you. Let them run and scatter before you. Do not acquiesce, and let them treat you like a doormat and let them walk over you. You not let anyone walk over you. You do whatever you do to stand your ground, and you make sure that you are not under the Pax Romanus. And the more you inspire your brothers and sisters to break away from this Pax Romanus, the faster we accelerate the true awakening away from this mess. Right? So this is the truth of it. This is, apology, but this is at the essence. We can sit here and talk and be good guys, all listen to each other having a chat here on the internet. But when this show's over, there's a high chance that your training will just continue leading into Pax Romanus.
Yeah,
and
I get a question for you, Arthur. If that cage that mostly self-imposed or in society has a lot to do in there, but it says the society, we can blame people, but it says the society. What about the language? For sure, the English language has a lot to do in our programming. What about ancient language like Hebrew and all that stuff, like the old language? What's your opinion on that? What could I learn? What could I learn more learning these languages other than the English language?
You're just going to learn another way to build a cage, because that was just another version of the cage. All alphabet tongues is this invisible cage. These are the early stages of the foundations. From Hebrew. Hebrew was the first alphabet language that came out of mathematics, which was used with the pictorial pictures of Egypt's, because Egypt is the system. Egypt, as far as this man is concerned, Egypt never existed. There was no land called Egypt. The land that we now call Egypt was ancient Greece. Ancient Greece is Egypt. The whole of ancient Greece is Egypt. Egypt means the system. And the Western world was born out of Egypt, right? Ancient Greece, all the philosophies, all the arts, the crafts, you name it, including all the philosophy, you name it. It's all ancient Greece. And the leaders of ancient Greece are the Mountbatten families today, the House of Windsor, the Merovingian bloodlines. They are all the house of the Israelites, the Israelites. These are the sects, the orders of the cults of Egypt, right? They do not live as a race. They're not a race or cultural creed. Same as the Jews. The Jews are not a race, culture, or creed. It's an ideology, a construct that people took on and called themselves Jew, right? But the original Jews were the original Greeks. But the Jews of today, the Ashkenazi Jews and all them, they are brainwashed. They're just different tribes, inculcated into the Talmud and into the Torah and into the Hebrew, right? But the black magic behind this were crafted by the high priests of Freemasonry, are the same high priests who founded French, Latin, Latin that became French, and the tongues that evolved into Italian and Spanish and all that. All alphabet language, including all the alphabet tongues of older Russia and Scandinavian countries and all through the Slavic countries, are satanic. They are the invisible cages. What we're looking at through, if you look through the eyes of their history, you're seeing the remains of the old overt system that was destroyed and collapsed all across Earth. All of them went down at the same time. The Incas, the Aztecs, the Mayans. These are all ideologies, but they are all of Egypt. They all have the system. You see, ancient China had it. Ancient Greece had it. The ancient Persia. Right even under the lands now of what we now call the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean are many, 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 many satellites of Egypt, civilizations that were annihilated. Absolutely annihilated. They all went at the same time. And it's very easy to prove it. They all had royal families divinely appointed by God, the rule of law of God, and the whole high priesthoods of God. They had mathematics and geometry. They all had astrology and astronomy and the arts, and they all had, read and write alphabet languages, all of them. What an interesting coincidence. Now, nowhere in nature teaches this. You can't go to nature, be brought up by nature, to learn about read and write alphabet languages, or learn about the symbolisms behind what formed hieroglyphics. That became Hebrew. That was evolved into the first Hebrew. The Hebrew was the first alphabet language. Don't listen to the Freemasons who made up all the recorded history. Yeah, because I point this out to you that you got to get the bigger picture here before you can comprehend how this invisible cage works. Is that up to 1780 AD, in their recorded ages of their history, 99.99% of the total population of man all across Earth could not read and write anything. It never did. That's 1780 AD in their recorded history. Even 1930 AD, still more than 90% of all of men could not read and write anything to be able to record his story. All his story was recorded by a tiny few, right? Roughly 20 per 1 million of the population. We're talking about the only ones that can read and write to record his story were the aristocrats, the landlords, the land barons, the high priesthoods, right? The kings and queens, the generals, all that kind of stuff. They were the only ones who can read and write. And it took 20 years to master the craft. So when you're talking about Hebrew, you're talking about someone who was initiated in Freemasonry for 20 years minimum. You had to learn mathematics before you could even learn to apply Hebrew and run it.
So if at that time they were preserved the language that much, the aristocrat families in France and UK and all that, they were preserving that, so they were not letting the people learn the language. So why suddenly they decided to let us learn their language, and we started to write books now, everything. So what are we supposed to?
We went from overt to covert.
With, like, I'm a bit lost here.
Hebrew was an overt. Sorry, Hebrew and Egypt, the ancient civilization, was an overt system.
Yeah,
a complete overt system. Conquered tribes of man across all of Earth. And the alchemy, which is science today, and all that comes out of this abomination, right? Now, there's a Hebrew couple, sorry, not Hebrew, there's a Hungarian couple who uncovered the evidence, and it's incontrovertible, that out of this last 2,000 years of recorded history, 1,000 years was made up. 1,000 years was made up out of the last 2,000 years. And you got to remember that, for example, when you're looking today with the inculcation of English or any alphabet language, when you're looking through a telescope or a microscope, which we talked about, and we're looking at a life form of nature, every single thought in our head is not coming from what we're observing. It's not coming from the life form. It's coming from the inculcation of the brainwashing that we practice, those layers upon layers upon layers of indoctrination, for our head to be spinning with alphabet thoughts that formed the life of a geologist or a biologist or an astronomer, right? Not a single thought is coming from reality. None of alphabets, that is, right? So when your head is spinning today in conversations, you're in a covert, invisible cage where the matrix is formed by how we dream thoughts that were provided to us, that we now call English and French. But going back to Hebrew, the system of Egypt was a commercial system, right? Egypt was in commerce, and the ancient Greeks have always been in commerce. So commerce, which we play with the words, is just animating the commercial that they advertise as the authorities of their power and control over all the tribes they conquered. And they have a Pax Romana in place where all the tribes are now trading with each other. They're all trading. Hence Marco Polo going across from Italy to China, why the Cabots traveled across to discover what they now call the new lands, which is a lot of rubbish, and Columbus and all this stuff. You're going to find there's a whole misnomer because the whole idea of Rome, Greece, was emperor, Caesar, Pharaoh, and everyone in their world underneath them are trading in the commerce of their overt power. And so that's what you're looking at. So when you're looking at things like the history books that explain to us everything at school, it was the Freemasons who designed the explanations, the definitions, so that when you're looking at the Colosseum and the remains of the Parthenon and that, You have his story coming with it. No different to looking through the telescope or the microscope. Your head is spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning, and there's not a single thought you have that you created. It was put in your head. So that's what Hebrew is. It's exactly what Hebrew is.
You got to think that in the overt system, they didn't need to let us learn their languages because there was no secret to what was going on. You know, it was, you dummy, stand over there. If you don't, you get lashed. You dummy, go build whatever. If you don't, you get lashed. There was no problem. But to change it to a covert system, they had to trick us into thinking that we're not under this power and control. So that's why they've let us learn the languages. That's why we have rights. We're allowed to stand up and say, hey, no, I don't agree. That's why we have democracy, because we think we're allowed to have a say in what goes on. And this is why they've had to let us learn the language. It didn't matter in the old days because there was no secret that they were just dumb idiot slaves who had to do what they were told. It's now we're still dumb idiot slaves who have to do what we're told, but they tell us and let us believe that we're not. And hence, we can learn the language and think that we can achieve anything, and that's why our children are always told, you're so special, you can get out there, you can be whatever you like. And they fail to tell them, actually, somebody's got to do the garbage, somebody's got to clean up the sewers, somebody's got to be the slaves to maintain all this system, and only a very, very few get the good life in the system of wealth and comfort, etc., etc.
Yeah, you see, it's overt Pax Romanus. It's not covert Pax Romanus. It's overt. And so all the trading amongst all the satellites of Egypt, because Egypt is the system, and the customs that were adapted to the system of those tribes that were conquered will vary from one to the next. Everything's different. But they all had, royal families divinely appointed by God, but they were answerable to all the higher priests of Freemasonry, who were the true power. So so even if you look at the Aztecs, Incas, the Mayans, and you look at all these civilizations, they all had in common royal families, divinely appointed by God. You can change the word royal families to a multiple form of defined words, but they are just the authorities in power overseeing overt control under Pax Romanus, everyone who's been conquered, because all those who've been conquered are under Pax Romanus. It's a peace treaty under a war zone, under a war act. Right, which is what we have today. The Western world is a Pax Romanus. The whole of the Western world, every single country that's in the Western world is under a Pax Romanus covertly, not overtly anymore. So what you got, the trading lines, the shipping lines, the protection of the trading routes. Then you had the rebels who didn't want to be under the Pax Romanus. You'd always have these rebels fighting. So they'd come and attack the legions until eventually the Romans or the Greeks or whoever would then send in a large army to go and find these rebels and kill them all to stop interfering with their trade routes. So this is where Afghanistan comes in, and this is where all the old days of Turkey and all this, the trade routes that now become through the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea and leading to the Mediterranean, and all the trade routes that went through the Germanic countries, and all the wars that the Romans had with the German tribes who fought against this because they didn't want to be under Pax Romanus, and they didn't want to have any kings or queens. Mind you, the fighting of the tribes would have led to their own leaders amongst them, because every tribe knew that they had to survive. They had to rally and become organized and disciplined, and they needed to have leaders, and they had to follow one direction to deal with any possible invasion. So we see the elements of all this war zone, Pax Romanus, all across Earth, because every tribe was being threatened by this invasion. They started originally by a tribe who decided, well, really, it would have been started by a man who probably covered another man's woman. And then from that, it would have led to, okay, I've got to start conquering another tribe, because that other tribe's going to be a threat to me, or a threat to what my greedy, selfish, egregore, lustful needs are. And so there's this covetousness, and there's this all kind of self-obsession, which we've gone into already so much in the previous things. But this invisible cage is full of the good-hearted. Every bird inside that cage has a good heart, flying, but can't get outside the cage. Every animal, every tree, and every seed it produces is raised up inside this invisible cage. Every bird and every chick is raised up inside the invisible cage. And I said to my daughter, this is the school you go to. When you go to school, you are that bird inside that invisible cage. You've been given rules under Pax Romanus. You're told, how you should dream, how you should think, how you should act, what you should do, so you do not interfere with the trade routes of brother to sister who have to perform the labor. Instead of being whipped and whipped to move sandstone blocks to build pyramids, they're now whipped through the laws where you must work to pay your taxes, to pay your bills, to pay your obligations to your superiors who are overseeing the Pax Romana of the peace treaties that you're in today. So the trade routes is you when you hop in the car and you drive to work and you're that white collar and you have to work to make the money. There are laws to protect that because you are a slave working for your king and queen, for your emperor, for your pharaoh, for your high priest, for your pope, for the highest levels. That's what's really going on. So everything you do right now, even with the internet, mum has to pay the bills for this internet. Mum has to pay for the electricity. Mum has to pay for this rent of this house. She is a commercial, she's a commodity. Her labor is all that matters. The money, the commerce doesn't exist. It's just a value system placed on her labor. And the different various qualities of materials determines the value. So you'll have a good quality grade of apples and you have poor quality grades of apples. I explain this to my daughter and I show all the different variables and how we create measurements, because the compass and square of Freemasonry is this. It's a commercial value, but the commercial value are definitions. They're made up as an imaginary thing. So all that's really happening when you break down and collapse this invisible prison, this covert control, it's you waking up, having to perform the language of that educated slave that produces results, that feeds the locals in power, who are the Freemasons, in the area where you live. And they are connected into the networks of the larger internationalized world of their New World Order, their one world system, one world government, one world control, one bloodline family. That's how it works. So every area in Canada, every area in America, every area in Australia is being broken down, localized, and you have a head of these Freemasons operating there. And they're amongst you. You might even call them the mayor of the local council. You might even call them the head of the police department. It doesn't matter. There's always one of them. And then there's a network to maintain order of this Pax Romana, so that all the trade routes of all the slaves can freely perform their responsibilities as bloody slaves going to work. So you have traffic lights, roundabouts, you have to have speed limits, all that, because these are trade routes of the slaves performing. So when you amplify it out to every aspect of the system, that's all it is. That's all it is. And the invisible cage was designed to trick everyone, to have a good heart, to keep the good heart, but believe that everything they're doing is the right thing, and not to have the willpower or the foresight to step outside this invisible cage and see for what it is and say, no, I'm smashing through and getting out of here. I said, this is the kind of dad you got. You want me to bring you up and you be brainwashed slaves? Or do you want to wake up and see the truth and be that good-hearted man who's not answerable to anyone's Pax Romana? Right? And that's why I said, look around you. And or maybe I'll drop a 5-minute video into this video when we put it up of the garden. Do you know why your father's done this? Is to show you that your father is providing abundance of food. So I don't go to work under Pax Romana. I work to produce the labor to give you the fruits that you can eat from the sweat of this man. But it doesn't pay as taxes to the locals of the Freemasons. Fiona does it through her labor when she pays the rent, but not the food we produce here or the water we capture here. And if they want to come and do that and steal all that, it's very out in the open, and this is where the curse comes into it. And then it depends on what mood we're in. Because I have no problem. I'm saying it straight out. If a man or men came here to kill us, I'd have no problem killing them. I have no problems killing them. Because it's no longer about right and wrong anymore. It's simply you have every right to stand your ground and be a man of peace. And a man of peace will fight for that peace. Because if you're under a Pax Romana, that is not a peace. There's no peace in a Pax Romana.
Yeah.
You're a broken
How
down
do you
soul,
suggest? How do you suggest we break free from that cage Arthur, by willfully or tragedy, or whatever way do you think you can move out from that cage?
Well,
Can we ever break that cage open?
The greatest gift we all have is the fact that we can create a living soul, and that if you're prepared to surrender your body to your conquerors and they kill you and murder you, you don't die. And let them, if you hold the bigger dream, and this is, I cannot bring you to this. Each of you will come to this if you truly dream it. And you cannot be copied because I say it, because that's not true either and not real. But when you create a living dream, and it's a living dream, and it's a real living dream, you don't die. You're beyond this. You don't even think about life and death anymore. You don't have a contrast between the two anymore. That's all gone. The presence of your life is present everywhere. And it's in the tree. It's in the birds. It's in the soil. It's in the whole of creation. There's not a single water drop anywhere in existence where we're not. When you can do this, you're indestructible. Now that's the greatest gift we've got. So basically you absorb them and let them experience everything and let it roll off into their annihilation. And then we come as those children again and live those lives without the Pax Romana anymore. You write it out that way. But that means you don't think about I own land, I own money, I own me, I name. You don't have any self-obsession. You are just the living dream of that, and you're inspired to be the sun that shines, and it's not defined, it's undefined. And you live that. Now that's the greatest gift, and that's the one I inspire everyone to. However, I don't begrudge another man to kill another man who comes to take their life. You can do that too, if you want to. You have every right to kill him. You have every right to rise up an army and go to the police station and conquer it and smash the building down and burn the fuckers. Burn their fucking courthouses. Burn their government buildings down. Destroy it all and recycle it all back into nature and free the people from this Pax Romanas. You have the right to do this. That does not mean you're an enemy of war. The lie is theirs, not yours. Their covert system is theirs, not yours. You're just standing up for being a real man. You have this right too. But it's not a right where you're answerable to God. There's nothing that you're answerable to. It's your conscience. Do you want to be a broken slave with a broken will and live like a broken down under this Pax Romanas? Because that's your choice. Or you're not. Now, I'm not talking about raising up armies and going to war, because that means you're just repeating the same mistake. What I'm saying is you peacefully work together with your brothers and sisters who can hold the bigger dream, and you create the living garden where there's no commerce, no trade routes of commerce going on. So there's no commercial animating the advertisement of Pax Romanas. But to do that, you've got to become free of self-obsession. You must not have any ego. You must not have any I or me or mine at all. It means you don't own anything. You own nothing. But you use everything, gifted, freely, like the sun that shines. So you've got to pick your friends wisely. You've got to build the foundations from small, amongst those small group who can keep it strong, keep it together, who have no back door. No back door. Because then it's indestructible. And if you want these localized Freemasons and their lackeys to come after you, it's their problem, not yours. And it's very simple to deal with these people, because you can ask them, are we your slaves? Straight out, yes or no. Are we your slaves? Because if we're not, then what are you doing here? Have we harmed you? Have we harmed your children? Are we injuring anyone? Are we committing crimes? Do you not want us to take full responsibility for our lives and create abundance and share it with your children? Create abundance where there's no pedophilia, there's no breaking and entering, where there's no crimes, because we make sure none of that is amongst us anywhere. Is this what you want? You want to destroy us? Murder us for what? You have to be able to have the guts to talk them into their face and scream at them if you have to. Because they have a conscience. They've got a good heart, these people. They're just brainwashed. They think they're doing the right thing. But when you know who you are, they break down. This man's broken many of them down. Police, political people have broken them down. They run, not run from you, the man's heart. They run because they protect the lie, because they're too scared, because they're under the oath that they don't carry out the orders. It's their family. It's their children. Every single Freemason is under this. There's not a single Freemason, including Prince William, who probably will be their Antichrist. He's under this as well. He turned against this, they'll kill him. There's not a single brother and sister in that world who's not under their own Pax Romanas. It's a rolling stone out of control. They are all brainwashed themselves. We are the ones who've got to fix this. Not them. They're not going to fix it. We have to fix it. So this invisible cage is what I talk to my daughters about. We're not violent. Just because we have the effects of this horror that we grew up in doesn't mean that we're bad or we're evil. Just because we look a certain way, dress and talk in certain ways, because of all the effects of that struggle. And it shows on our bodies, and that doesn't mean that we're fucked in the head, that we've lost the plot. We haven't. But don't sit around talking, thinking you're going to think when you get up the next morning to run your restaurant, or you go to run your cafe, or go and work and do your milk run, or you go to your job because you got to go and clean the streets. That somehow miraculously, in all of this, there's going to be a miracle, and all this will be gone, because it will not. Because if you don't wake up and fight from your heart, meaning do not let the sun be shut down, do not sell out, and you penetrate your light everywhere, so its presence is everywhere. And if they run, the neighbors run, it's their problem, not your problem. You don't have to break into their homes, you don't have to persecute them, but don't sell out. Don't give up. You've got to show, you've got to show the example how to live without Pax Romanas. You've got to act like a man who's not under Pax Romanas. But you need your brothers and sisters working together so that one of you is free from this. And then 2 of you, then 3 of you, then 4 of you, then 10 of you, then 100 of you. You can do this peacefully. All the talking in the world will do nothing. You can watch this video, and then tomorrow you watch another video. You'll be going to work. You'll be under Pax Romanas. Nothing's changed. That's what the last 12 years of doing this life while I work, that's what I see. You know how many brothers and sisters who still write to me about the UCC, about redemption, about some kind of, there must be a way that I can reclaim my birth certificate. And I say to them, but if you have access to this SDQ trust and you get your $1 billion, because every man has been given $1 billion or $1 million, whatever it is, doesn't matter what it is. If you create a precedence, or one of us creates a precedence, and everyone gets access to this account, instantly overnight, everything's worthless. Because everyone's got $1 billion. Who's going to go to work? Who's going to run the machines, work the streets? Everything stops.
You'll be wanting to go on your cruise with your $1 billion, but there's no cruise ship and no one working on the cruise ship.
Because they're all too busy with their $1 billion.
$1 billion trying to spend their $1 billion and no one can spend it.
And so then we get all these people who come to us, Arthur, what's the right paperwork? And I'm thinking, oh God, this guy's on the Pax Romanas. He's trying to find a peace treaty within his Pax Romana so he can have extra goodies while he's a good slave. He's asking me to maintain his slave status. And I said, I'm not that man for you. I'm not of that world, you know. And I tell him, there's no remedy in the system, because everything in the system will keep Pax Romanus as it is, and you will maintain yourself as a broken down slave. Yeah, you're going to see many slave victories. No doubt about it. We know brothers out there are driving with no car regos, no car plates or nothing. And they're persisting. Even though they're still being harassed, they keep getting pulled over, they go through it, they get harassed. They decide that's the way it is for them. They don't go to jail, they don't pay fines, they get let go, because the next choice is go to the, put them in jail, lock them up, for what? So, and then especially those guys who know how to hold the bigger picture and let them have their curse, that becomes a very lethal thing to these people. So running around.
It's a mental genocide out there. Let's put it. Let's call it for what it is. It's a mental genocide.
The mental genocide is the fact that we believe in what we were told, everything that defined the life we're now living, and yet the whole thing is fake. It's an invisible man trapped inside an invisible cage, believing that all of it is real, and none of it is real at all. So, you know, what I'm getting at is that there is no paperwork. The UCC is a fraud. You're going to have heaps and heaps of intel operatives all over the place telling you how to think about freedom, and they'll provide you with paperwork. But when you use paperwork, who are in the Pax Romana are you asking? Because you're talking to a slave master. So no matter what piece of paper you're going to scribble, no matter what is that story, which particular slave master are you writing to? You can call them a government authority, government agency, a department. Who? You're admitting you are still a broken down slave under Pax Romana, and you're asking them to improve your slave status. You want them to give you better conditions. You want to change the prison cell from grey to pink, and you have some little bells and whistles inside there and lovely little toys and things just to keep you enchanted like a little baby in a crib. Please improve my conditions. Please keep me distracted. But there's no remedy in this. You're maintaining the slave status system. And all it is self-obsession. I want better conditions for me. I want better conditions for my family. Meaning I still want to climb above the pile of broken down men and women who created the mountain of fucking shit for you to have your piece of paper you're going to serve on your Pax Romana slave master to give you a bit better conditions. Forgetting all those brothers and sisters below it who have to do what they've got to do so you can have your fucking piece of paper and ask them to improve your slave conditions. And I tell them, you're a fucking idiot. You're so fucking stupid. Wake up. Wake up.
You know what I think is one of the worst disease that's affecting us right now? It's indifference. We're so indifferent to our own greatness, first of all, our own light, our own everything. We're so indifferent to others. I think indifference is one of the major diseases afflicting humanity right now.
It's apathy and denial that goes with it. It's the attachment to the fake persona where the English or French or Italian or Greek alphabet languages are going on inside the head, right? Of that invisible cage, of that invisible man with dreams that man doesn't even have, that was created by the man. They're just fake implanted dreams about freedom, consciousness, life, goodness. It's all predetermined. What do you have to say, Scott?
Not a whole lot, to be honest, man. I agree completely with a lot of what you're saying. There's a lot I haven't experienced that you've experienced, but I mean, it's hard to doubt anything that's being said. I mean, you can see the system all around you doing exactly what you're saying is doing. One thing I wanted to mention earlier about, everyone living in the cage, the imaginary cage. Fiona mentioned how, I can't remember what she mentioned, but it just made me think of even with, mothers, how most mothers are very protective of their children because they sense that something is wrong. So they don't want to give them too long of a leash because they're scared they might get hurt. The system might take its toll on their children, and they're very fearful of it. Because not only because they're fearful, but because they have a certain attachment to this child too, of what the child is for them. And it's just that I'm bringing this back because it was interesting because it's a cage within a cage within a cage. It's like, it's not just this one invisible barrier. There's thousands, hundreds of thousands of these invisible barriers. And it's like, we think we're out of the cage at one point, but really we're just peeling the onion. And it's like to think of, I actually had a little bit of if you want to call it an epiphany, but like, that not being scared of death, not seeing the contrast between life and death, what you were trying to talk about there. It was really interesting because like, really that is the only way to get out of the cage. It's not like a physical act of, yay, I'm free from the cage. It's more of where you're at in the mind, if you want to call it. It's just not being caught up in it all. I mean, like you talk about, being in the system but not being of the system. It kind of reminds me of that, where it's like, yeah, you're no longer, you're living with people who are in the cage, but you're not caught up in that cage yourself. it might seem like you still operate within the cage with everyone else, but as long as you're not there in your head and you have that living dream and you're pushing that forward and you live for that dream, you don't live for all these layers of the onion of the cage, then really you're free. There's no other, it's like it happens right now in this moment, every moment after there. It's not some journey to get to this door that all of a sudden, hooray, I'm out of the cage now. Oh, that was so much hard work, but it was worth it. Look where I am now. And even if there was something like that, it's like, if there was something like that, are you bringing all your brothers and sisters with you? Are they all out of the cage too? Because if they're not, then you're not out of the cage, because everyone else is still slaving for you and doing, like, talking with the UCC and all that stuff. It's all worth this if you're the only one. And it's just,
and they bring with them
again the onion, the layers and layers. It's completely bullshit, really. Even the layers.
No end to the layer of the onion, Scott. There is no end to the layer of the onions, because when you're inside the inculcation, the alphabet thoughts keep coming, layer after layer, and you're still trapped in that invisible prison.
Yeah, the onion
prison. The only way to step outside of that onion is to completely step outside of the whole damn thing, right? Where you're thinking with sense, you're dreaming with your senses and not with the nonsense. Because while you're in the nonsense, you will always be under Pax Romana's trapped in the matrix or the rabbit warren designed by the occultists who, look, you know, ABC is a library. You imagine going inside a library and you have to read every single book in that library. And this is a huge library, like the Library of Alexandria, for example. You start as a little kid, and by the time you're an old man with a mega long beard, you still haven't come out of the onion ring, because your head is spinning. Just like the scientist who looks through the telescope and microscope, there is not a single thought that was coming from reality. It's all made up by definitions of other men who defined it for you. And the layers and layers and layers and layers go on, because every day you went to school, every day you practice reading and writing, every day the definitions of mum and dad. It all started in the womb, because the multi-laying of what it is to be a good mother, what it is to be a good father, what it is to have a good heart, all that stuff, and what it is to eat good. So, you know, eating good is going to McDonald's, because McDonald's is happy. It's got a lot of smiling people there. You know, Coca-Cola sees a lot of young kids and they're jumping up and down with their sandmobiles up there on the beach, and the waves are breaking and they're about to get their surfboards. They're fucking good people. Coca-Cola is happy. Right?
And you know, another...
They're making lots of money.
But then comes vaccinations. There's a lot of good people out there who are very happy with vaccination. They've got good hearts. They all love it. And
another thing I want to mention also is our children. You know, it would be very important. It's okay we break free from the cage or we recognize the cage, but it would be important to teach them what's possible rather than teach them our fears, because we're teaching them our fears. I've done that all my life. Teach my fears to my children, so they're even stuck in the cage themselves without even sensing it or knowing it. You put the cage upon them with... Cage can come with different ways. There, you put cage with the food, also with the bad food, with the toxic shit.
Well, you can teach them what's possible. That's putting them in a cage, because that's current to you. What's possible? That's telling them this is your option. This is what's possible. Even if it's something good and great that you think, it's a type of cage. Impossible.
Yeah, but
type of cage. I get what you're saying, but it's just like you have to be careful with teaching them what is possible. You're still directing them. And you have to be careful with what's insightful and what's actually teaching and instructing.
Well, it's difficult, Scott, because every road in Rome, which is every alphabet thought in our head, leads to the commercial system where the slave performs its duties. So it wouldn't matter what we say to our kids, what we talk about, they will wake up and go to bed as those educated slaves in the covert system. Well, mind you, this will become overt very soon, because when the New World Order pushes further ahead to this quota system, it becomes overt again. It will revert from covert to overt, because it has to be brought out into the open. It cannot be done covertly. So you're going to have an overt system where everyone will see who the Federation is, because it's like Star Trek Federation, and everyone in Star Trek is in a cashless world under the advanced technologies with alien races and all this stuff. But there's this Federation operating in the background. And their Federation is the one in power overseeing everything. And that is overt. It's overt. So you're looking, when I mentioned the other videos, you're going to be looking at an overt system of bloodline Freemasons who all come together. They're all the children of these fucking.
But it'll be all for the right reasons.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Because they've got good hearts.
It won't be this slave slash. It'll be, hey, we've all got to be seen to be doing the right thing. We've all got to make a difference. We've all got to do our bit. But just watch if you don't. It'll be
basically it's a quota system, and it'll be noted to see the New World Order, the real New World Order, is the remedy to the current chaos. So the Freemasons work as both the good guys and the bad guys. So when you're talking about, children setting an example, you've got to see the bigger picture, the psyops here at practice, because we will act as the good guys with the good heart that keep the commercial commodities of our children performing in the system as the educated slaves. So, and that's what they see when they go to school. They see the roads before them, and they see all the traffic routes of their brain thinking, because they have to think about a career. They got to go to university or think about what kind of life, or where they're going to be a mother, because even a mother gives birth to the birth certificate of the commercial commodity of a child, who then receives the signature and gets the government handouts, which the mother creates from the signature. The government doesn't create it because it's no money. It's just the fictitious value that's placed on her labor to produce children for Caesar. So the commercial commodity is that vessel that sails on the seas of finance, which is the system, right? So we will go from that now to a quota system, where everyone is answerable to an oligarchy, but it'll be a good guy oligarchy that was born off the back of all the bad guys, because all the bad guys engineered all the chaos to bring all of man to their knees, and bring the whole of earth with everything to their knees, to force man to say, please, something must be done. And then the Freemasons will come out, well, look, here's a remedy. And Prince William will be brought forward, more than likely. And then they'll bring in this new system, earthwide, and literally, bang, overnight, because the Freemasons got the finger on the pulse of every system, media, government, military, you name it, black ops, it doesn't matter. It all stops. And suddenly we slip into a whole new system, right? So this was all engineered. This is part of the grand plan of this one bloodline family from right back. Was planned. So you got to think about an even bigger picture, which is what I keep drumming into my kids bit by bit as they can grasp it. And why I talk about this invisible cage, because the invisible cage is your acquiescence and compliance to perform as a commercial vessel on the seas of their world, in their world. You're both in their world and of their world, and everything you do is this slave, educated slave. So if you don't want that, you've got to now start looking at your mum and dad. What are we doing? Well, one of the things, we're creating a garden. We wake up and go to bed creating abundance. We try and inspire brothers and sisters so the garden will spread. And as the garden spreads, the fences break down, and more brothers and sisters are creating a food forest of abundance. The more the food forest of abundance shines, there is no commercial vessels amongst it, because no one's waking up and going to bed for Caesar under quota. Because in the New World Order, you have to perform responsibilities. Now, it is no different to the serfs and commoners of what we now call the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, where they had landlords, land barons, right? Kings and queens, churches, priests, ministers, who were landholders. And the serfs asked the renters, because that's what a serf is, a renter, asking for permission to have a piece of land to grow food, raise your children, take care of animals, do animal husbandry or agriculture, right? But whatever the arrangement is, whether the landlord says, okay, I want you to come and clean my castle 1 or 2 days a week. I want you to be a maintenance worker, or I want you to be in my army so we can procure more land and fight for whatever it is you want to fight for to protect the estate, the E-state. Or you have to give me, through tithing, 50% or 40% or 70% of all your crops. I want your first daughter, your first son to come to work for me in my castle. Whatever the arrangements may be, is exactly the quota system you're going to have today, but it'll be under the guise, all good and nice, where you have to wake up and perform duties for your community and be seen to be doing it, or you are answerable to the oligarchy in power, no different to what you got today, at the point of you being a rebel and being ostracized from it all and having no access to land and have no rights whatsoever and be left out of it all. So you'll see the transition where the credit cards, the cashless system, you'll have to walk with a chip or some kind of technology. It could even be iris scan. Very likely it could be iris or even finger scan. It could be arranged them. And if you do not have the equity, the 1 and 0 records of your ledger on your account,
The credits of your labor.
yeah, the credits of your labor, if you do not have it, the doors of the supermarket will not open for you. The petrol station will not let you take the barrels and put petrol in your car. And on it goes like this. You'll be denied. And then from that, the gradualism of the ostracization increases. Right? Now, the other thing they've been doing, and this is a fact, the FEMA situation in America, the FEMA camps, is nothing compared to what we're seeing all over Earth, because all the new football stadiums, all the new all the light rail systems or main railway systems that ties in with the football stadiums and other stadiums are the detention camps. As they bring in these curfews under the police states and military war and all these other things that will unfold, because they have to do it. They've got to create such chaos. They already got the names of everyone they've targeted, that they must go under this nightmare of, imagine a fog or dust storm, and no one can really see what's going on. They send all their lackeys in to pick up everyone, just like they did in the stories of the Germans and the Jews, and putting them on the trains and sending them to their detention camps. The same thing will happen. Everyone who's been targeted has been marked. It's already been marked, and they keep looking for it. That's what the whole purpose of the internet is. It's one of the greatest forms of intel, to listen and find those who need to be marked, to be detained. And they have already got in place the networks to come after you, after us, in every area, right? Because they're all good-hearted people too, all doing the right thing. So you're going to find that there will be a mass culling if we let them get away with this. And the population of man will be reduced to 500 million, probably less, could even be down to 300 million. And Africa and Australia will become playgrounds for the rich.
That's one thing. That's one thing. They are planning on reducing the population. You cannot deny that. Come on, everybody can agree with that. Just look at the poison around us.
We are all doing it.
I was just saying, if you look at Hollywood, you can see where they're currently training that thought into people. All the movies that are coming out right now are directed towards everything that we're talking about. And in a way, they're using that to make it look like it's fantasy and it's all, you just watching too many movies. It's all movies. There's nothing true about that. But I mean, if you're keen to what's actually going on, you're aware of what's actually going on, they're fully laying it out and how they want it to happen. A few different options too.
Because the invisible cage is fantasy. So the whole of Hollywood is feeding the invisible cage of all those trapped to the fantasy of this fake dream world. So it's actually blatant manufacturing of inculcated slaves. So you've got a whole array or a whole plethora of scenarios. We have this 1 million Chinese army. And you've got to look, I don't want to get too much into all this stuff, but Britain, the Israelites of Britain, the High Freemasons, spent 300 years through the East India Company fighting what we now call China. And it took the Opium Wars to finish off the tribes all through those regions. And Britain conquered what we now call China. Britain's been in control of China all this time. Same with America. Britain is in control of America, has always been in control of America. Britain is in control of Europe. Britain's in control of Australia, all the Commonwealth countries. Britain's even in control of Russia to a point, right? Because of the Bolshevik Revolution, when Trotsky and Lenin, all that were funded out of Wall Street by British money players, detained by the Canadian government en route back to Europe via Austria, back here through, I don't remember, it was through whatever means it was to get it back into Russia to fund the first Bolshevik Revolution, which they were beaten. to bring down the royal Tsar families, right? But the second attempt, they won it, right? This is Britain, but it's not British as the British people. It's the Freemasons. It's this one bloodline family who act as British, who act as Jews, who act as Greek, who act as Italian, who act as Canadians, who act as punk rockers, who act as actors and fashionistas, who act as business people, the Richard Bransons, who act as the good guys like David Icke. They're all in on it. They all come from this fucking family. They're all in on it. It's a scam, blatant.
But when you see in Canada, you see Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and then you see his son, Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister. Like, what the heck is this? You can tell it's all framed, it's all organized. Come on, we don't elect, we don't say nothing. It's no selection there. We just elect. So they decide everything. They decide who to put in place and which country, where.
Let's correct this. Everyone's under Pax Romana, where they've accepted the education that forms the marionette of the slave who does everything in the slave system. So they feed you with the fantasy to keep you in the fantasy. So all this annihilation has been done by all the good-hearted men and women who wake up and go to bed as those slaves under Pax Romana. We're doing it. They're not doing it. They're not doing it at all. We're doing it. They just give us the information for us to carry it out. But we do all the dirty work. We are their soldiers. We are their navy. We're their labor force. I mean, the promise of sending all the tribes out of Europe to Australia, to this promised land they called Australia just over supposed 200 years ago, right? And we had educated slaves or non-educated slaves. They came as the Chinese, the Greeks, the Italians, the Irish, the British, you name it, the Welsh. They came here. And what did they do? They were promised under the Pax Romana of this land, which was conquered to defeat all the man on the land on this land. What did they do? They started building the roads. They started building the railways. They started building all the telecommunication systems. They started building the lighthouses. They started building all the ports and the harbors, all the central information networks, which we now call Central Railway, and shipping terminals. They built everything. They built, but there's nothing that our ancestors didn't build. But when the infrastructure was set up, the middle class that grew out of this has now been attacked. So we don't have a middle class now either, because all that has been destroyed, because once they built all that, they all had to be returned back as those serfs and commoners under the landlords and land barons who are in control of all the infrastructure of now what we call Sydney or New South Wales. Right? Local. Everyone's living local, all across Earth, and they're all under an internationalized one world system. And everyone worked to build it. It was all fucking slaves, all of us fucking slaves doing this. We're still doing it, and we're still doing it, and we're all bringing the new order in because we're fucking doing it. And we don't see it because we don't see how the invisible cage works.
Yeah, because we talk about one love and all that shit.
Exactly. There's no one love.
And we're still doing it as we get more and more into, hey, we've got to all grow our own vegetables and eco-friendly and environmentally friendly, and what we don't realize is this is exactly what the new world order is. It's going to be all this one love, environmental, one world religion, etc. And so we're bringing it in for them already before we even know what it is. We're bringing it in for them.
These Freemasons, these high-level occultists, they already had everything recorded. The grand plan was mapped out before they even arrived on every single land, before every tribe who saw them as UFOs and aliens and all that shit, because that's how they came. They were all gobbledygook, Martian talk nutcases, right? So you find that it's this commercial channels where the roots all lead back to Rome or Greece, and everyone is answerable to the high-level occultists who act as Pope, who act as King and Queen of England, King and Queen of Belgium, King and Queen of the Netherlands, King and Queen of Greece, King and Queen of Spain and France, or act as the president and the prime ministers, who act as dictators, right? You know, it doesn't matter where. Everything has been brought down by invasion, re-education, reorganization of administration, right? That's what happened to Cambodia after Pol Pot and the CIA and all that stuff. Now we have this whole new blossoming, educated Cambodians, all came out of the forests, all educated. So, you know, we're doing it, guys. We're doing it all. And the remedy...
If there's a president in the United States, means it's a corporation, so it's not even a country.
Exactly. But it is a commercial, you see, because the grand plan, the reason why it's a private corporation is because it is Pax Romanus. It's basically every single man must work for Caesar. So they live their life generating labor, resources from their labor for their contribution of that tithing to Caesar. Now, you don't have to call it, Caesar's going to be Prince William. But the point is, you know, and everyone will be answerable to Prince William. And this has already been set up. The Pope will answer to Prince William. All of them will. He'll be the superpower. But he's still answerable to the bloodlines, his intimate network bloodlines. And if he steps out of line, gone. And the next one will take his place. The next one will take his place. Right? We, those of us, we have to set the example how to live without Pax Romanus. We have to use their information highways. Use it. But you got to sell your home. You got to give it up. You got to give up your land that you own. You got to give it all up and bring in place brothers and sisters who are committed to live without Pax Romanus, which means you've got to learn how to set up a mudroom and make sure everyone learns how to become egoless and not self-centered. So no one ever wakes up and goes to bed thinking about what's in it for me, what's best for me, what's best for my children, what's best, because none of this goes on anymore. We don't think like this anymore. Because it's not about me, I, mine, because we already got everything. We already are the trees. We already are all the land. We're everything. So why would we fucking want to covet it? Then it's just a matter of letting it shine freely. Because a man who's conscious would never want to covet another man or deny another man's freedom, because there's no invisible cage to close another man under, inside. Right? So the presumption that is the doubt and uncertainty that forms the Pax Romanus brainwashed slave is what has to be smashed. So it's not a war as we were taking up weapons and become another revolution. This kingdom is a peaceful, non-violent revolution. We don't go to war with weapons in terms of armies. We use our passion, we use our tongue, and we use our bodies, and we're producers of creativity. And everything we create, we do not own. We own nothing. And when we fix this, and then we can produce children who can be brought up by nature with no one training them anymore, brainwashing them, then we will start to return back to how things were, where every man was free, no man was under another man, right? But until we've built these bridges that we talked about in last week's show, we've got to build these bridges, work with those leaders who are going to be involved with each bridge to get all the brothers to go across this bridge and then burn the bridge and then make sure to destroy everything so no man is underneath another man for anything. And that every man is a peaceful man, not under Pax Romanus. Then we have paradise, and we're back to where we were before all this shit started. So we've got to get rid of this invisible cage. And that's what I've been showing to my daughters and my youngest one, you know. And her eyes started really lighting up yesterday when I showed her how this invisible cage was keeping all these animals inside. And I said, you know, and I was telling her, do you want to set them free? What you do now is, and I remember she said something like, I want to go there now and just break that cage. I want to let them out now. You know, and I said, good. You don't lose that. You keep that spirit, girl. You keep it going.
That's it. Keep the spirit alive.
If I was telling her, if they take me out, if this man's body go, you don't give up. And you don't give up. You don't give up. And you don't give up. Because
Babylon can kill what can never die.
Just remember the most important thing. We're meant to create unique original dreams because it's there where our soul is. And if we don't create unique original dreams through our senses, there is no soul there. Everything is a lie, and everything you're thinking is that slave inside Pax Romanus, under Pax Romanus. You're in the consciousness of Pax Romanus, or you're in the conscious under that Pax Romanus. You're in the freedom under that Pax Romanus. You're in the peace under that fucking Pax Romanus. You're in the New World Order.
So like he was saying, Scott, breaking free from that cage is pretty much also freeing your mind. Free your mind from all the nonsense and the bad vibes and
It's
the
letting go.
evil stuff. Stay far from Babylon evil.
It's just letting go, man. Letting go of everything.
Yeah.
That possession, right? You don't own anything. It's just letting go.
But having a passion
is practicing right now is just letting go. Like even right now, there's a lot of pressure from my family to find a wife and have kids, have a family, start this, do this, and this. It's like I'm constantly keeping myself aware of not getting sucked into that, because that's just me wanting to attach on to some dream that someone else has dreamt for me, so I can go live in it, which is just the cage, right? And I'm learning.
What's wrong with producing a few commercial vessels, Scott?
What's that?
What's wrong with producing a few commercial vessels for your mother?
Well, she wants it for her own self-obsession, obviously, but it's just interesting just being aware of all this stuff. And like the whole owning of land, when I first came out to Australia, that was kind of on my mind. Oh, wouldn't it be nice if I could own a piece of land, because that would solve everything. It's just like the more and more I see it, it's just, yeah, it's this possession is what helps us or makes us create this cage. The cage doesn't really exist, but as soon as we start possessing things, we build up around us, and all of a sudden we start being aware of this and thinking that we need to peel away from this cage, but really it doesn't exist anywhere. It's not a real thing. It's just our need to hold on to something and to be, because really we're just scared. We doubt ourselves. We doubt that we don't have everything we need. That's why, like, I can only imagine when Arthur said, no, you got to sell up everything. You got to do this. You got to do that. How many people are going, whoa, holy, whoa. Because automatically they're going, me. What about me? I'm not going to sell everything. I worked so hard for this. It's mine. I put all my life into this. It's like, well, yeah, now that's that possession. So why not just all this energy that you put into it, set it free. Give it to your brothers and sisters. Because when you give it to your brothers and sisters, you're sharing freely this abundance. It's naturally going to come back to you. And when you do that, that's true. That's living out of the cage. That's completely obliterating the cage, because you're not owning it anymore. You're not possessing it anymore. You're not making it real. You're not dancing for it anymore. And that's all it is. Like, there's no peeling of the layers. There's no peeling of the onion. Like I said, there's no onion. None of that's, it's all bullshit. It's just us fucking dancing and make-believing. But as soon as we let go of it, all of a sudden it's not there anymore. Oh, fancy that.
Another thing we have to let go, and that's the case of many people. We're in a cage because of credit card, bills, and shit like that. Expenses, we buy stuff we don't need. We're stuck in a cage because of our expenses, and all the stuff we buy that we don't need, that puts us in a cage. The credit cards and all that shit. It's terrible. Me, I don't know how people can sleep at night with that. I minimize my consumerism, my consumption. I buy what I need, not what I want. People buy too much stuff, I think, and they go in debt, and that can keep them in a cage. Another cage that
is all still the same cage of self-obsession, because that's what has that. I need this, I want this, I want this, I want this. Whereas, if we did all get together and actually make the commitment to work together, that's when we can move away from all that. It's singly and alone in our little isolated cells that we can't exist without paying the bills and everything. But as we move, if we move together and support each other unselfishly, then that's when you get more and more people who can actually step away from the bills. But they're really productive because they're producing the food while others keep paying the bills. And in the end, that's how we free each other. So we can't free ourselves. We can't free who we are. We have to free everyone around us.
But in doing that, you're free. So the thing is that behind the church is the system. Behind the synagogue is the system, right? Behind the mosque is the system. Behind the New Age is auditoriums is the system. Behind flat earth is the system. Behind everything that's become a revolution or a movement, right, is the system. The system is the commercial commodities of brainwashed, educated slaves performing as the vessels on those trade routes that is going to work coming home. Because every commercial vessel has an address, has a number with a house, right, or a flat or an apartment or a bus stop. Doesn't matter where they sleep. And while we're running around in flat earth, you are an educated slave performing in Caesar's world as a commercial commodity. So you're distracted. The same when you wake up and go to bed with Christianity and you're Jesus and your Messiah. You are a commercial vessel marked as that entity who performs commercial duties for Caesar under the laws of Pax, under the Pax Romana with all its laws. That's why you pay taxes. That's why you pay bills and fees. That's why you're answerable to the police. That's why you abide by the rules and regulations of driver's licenses and car registrations and passports and Medicare and government handouts. And you have these people in your life. Why you give up your children and send your children to them, to strangers who brainwash them for you. And why you have to be, why you're so fucking busy, you haven't got time for even to raise your own children, because you've got to keep your roof over your head. You got your lifestyle, and you've got to keep your fashion statement. You're looking your appearance right. Now, all this self-obsession. The remedy is not being trapped inside the onion ring of flat earth or Christianity or any of them, because all the Christians who are saved are fucking commercial entities right now, trapped, supporting Caesar's will, and they're bringing up all their children to be in the system, and they will easily adapt to the new world order because they don't know anything else. They don't have any dreams to think anything else outside of it. They don't have a single dream that they've created that's unique to them. They're commercial commodities, right? See, the commercial commodity, or the animation of the commercial commodity that we advertise, is just a dream of another man that we took on, and we act out that dream. So we're giving our energy, our life energy, to another dream that brings us under another man who gains all the power while we perform that man's dream for that man, that man invented. And that's what the crown is. And everything comes out of the crown. This was all in their books where they brought this grand plan to now what we call Australia. And everything that's happened, what they brought to Canada, or brought to America, and what we now call every country in Europe. It was all originally just tribes of man and land amongst food forests, magnificent lands and rivers, before we stuffed it all and brought the firmament down and brought the waters out from the earth, and that filled up all the lowlands and annihilated. So now we've got oceans and seas. We never had oceans and seas till 1,200 years ago, guys. All this carbon dating and evolution is all bullshit. It all happened recently, and there's no beginning. People think that somehow there was a beginning. There's never been a beginning to who we are.
See, if the cage is invisible, that means people don't see it. People don't know that they don't know, and they don't know. So it goes far. It's like the lies and the deception in the world. People don't know what's going on. So the cage, I didn't even know I had a cage over me. Before I listened to Les Brown, the motivational speaker, telling me to live my freaking dream, I wasn't even asking myself the question, do I have a living dream? So it's deep. It's freaking deep, the programming we're under. I lived it myself, the freaking cage, and I think I'm still in it. I'm trying to break free from it. This is an exercise that I give myself, a tool that I give myself, YouTube, to speak my mind, to, gain strength also, and just express the power. It's not to reclaim it. I have power. I have all that's necessary to face life. I shouldn't be scared. I shouldn't be, but that's what it is with the fear, the cage, and all this. Then we end up freaking dying with our song still inside. Isn't it freaking sad? Our whole life. We have one life to live. And we're going to die with our song still inside because we're in fear. We're in a cage, and we don't even see the cage. That's the thing. So how do we bring people to see that? I think it's just shining your light by example. You change the world by example, not by opinion. So just our example here tonight should wake up some souls.
Living substance. When you're producing vegetables and you're giving it to your neighbors freely, that's substance. It's a living substance, and with your thoughts and intentions. And this is, it comes again. The reason why I mentioned at the beginning of the show about the neighbor across the road. I'm looking at these people, and they're really good people, truly good people, but they want me their slave. They want my children to be slaves. They love the slave system. They love the street with the commercial numbers of all the houses, and they hop in their car so she can perform her commercial duties as part of her joint entertainment of those commercial duties. But she wants me a slave. She wants my family to be a fucking slave. Now, broaching the subject with her, well, that's challenging to talk to someone who's in their 70s, heading towards their graveyard. They've got children, they're in their 40s and 50s, and I've got to know some of them. Now I got one of them I'm talking to and talking. He's probably even watching some of these now, these videos. But the point is, at some point, at some point, it's that militaristic, that militant attitude, but without the commercial side of it. So we don't come as an act of war against a brother. We come as a firebomb of love, of unconditional love, intense, where there's no dimmer switch on us. We've not dimmed down. We are just radiant. And if they can't not handle it, let them burn in it. It's not our problem. Because if we do not radiate, there is no light anywhere. So we are the example. We've got to create that example, how to be, and let children know that you are unique and original. You're different. We cannot define you. No brother can define us. So ignore all the emotions of everyone when they make opinions about you, what they think about you, how he looks, how he talks, how he acts. Fucking ignore it all. It's all shit. Right? Because that's how they keep you down. And when you get sucked into that, you're still trapped in that invisible prison, because it's only those in the invisible prison who talk to you like this, who talk to others about you like this. And that's how they keep everyone in the prison. Right? You got to watch out for this crap.
Oh, we have to be wise. We have to be wise. But we're getting stronger, wiser, and smarter. I think all of us we're doing a great job. Me, I feel so much more alive than before. Also, working on a dream, working on something, and just using my voice, not being an echo, and just speaking my mind. I think I'm free from all self-oppression now, so I'm just but not free from all self-oppression, because it's always there, the little voice inside, and that's the negative programming that we have. But it's a struggle every day. It's a struggle every day to live your dream, to live the dream of life, because the world is negative and people are in a cage. And that's sometimes when I look around me, I feel like I'm in a freaking twilight zone. It's so insane, the hypnotizing of the society, like how much we're hypnotized. And like Patrick said, the cage is so clear. It's so clear that it's invisible.
So the thing that it goes back to the beginning of what I was saying in the show when I was talking to my children about why does this man become so worked up inside him? And I go through periods every month where I get this, and I just go like this, and I go, fuck, fuck. It's because we have sensed it all. We absorb, we're living consciousness. You can't ignore this stuff. It's real. And when you really wake up, you feel the true pain and suffering of everything around you that's harmed and being lost. You can't ignore it, in that way, but you can make it so it doesn't affect you. So no matter how bad it is, you can still make the right decisions that don't amplify it and feed it. You've got to be able to remain detached. Now, look, back to the remedy. We have to, these are things that I think are very, very important. We have to learn to poo in our garden. We have to learn to capture our poo and recompost our poo. We have to wee in the garden. Why? Because the life force energy of your presence, your consciousness is in it. And the more that you, abide by the laws, don't chemicalize your poo, you make sure you do the right thing and you compost toilet, you do whatever you got to do, but do not use chemicals or any other poison to fuck it. You must capture it and let it break down naturally, and then mix it in 6 months down the line, whatever, with compost, and break it all down in your hands if you want, and go and sprinkle it everywhere, and just sprinkle it on top of all the ground covers everywhere, because the presence of your life is there, and the essence of who you are is in your poo, in your wee, in your breath. So the more that you hold the big picture as you poo, as you wee, and why you're pooing, why you're weeing, it's telling you why you're alive, why you live. You know what you dream for. You know what you're waking up for and what you're doing. You're not thinking about the fucking tax department. You're not thinking about the motor cars and the petroleum industry. You're thinking about the living dream and producing life from the living dream, where the animals are free and they're not in the invisible cage. And this is how you start. Don't bash yourself up because, like we are in a suburban property, in a suburban rental property, on 1/8 of an acre. And we're probably producing, this next period, we'll go from 1.5 ton to up to 2 ton a year in food. There's no doubt about we're doing that. But the thing is that we want to gift it, what we don't eat. We want to gift the rest. And otherwise it becomes composting, and spread all the accumulation of the compost, because everything is growing and expanding, right? Everything is growing and expanding. We're producing more and more. Either this little 1/8 block starts rising up with the ground until it's taller than the fucking house, or we're going to have to distribute the ground and the soil everywhere, because everything is growing and expanding with our co-creation. When we breathe out, we're adding to the existing water. We're creating water, adding. So it's expanding. Everything's expanding. So you've got to realize what we are and how gifted we are, and not be sucked into all the stuff. So capture your poo.
Well,
Operate within Caesar's laws.
On a simple level, what his mother does when she's going to plant a tree, she'll put a bucket in her toilet, and so she'll poo in the bucket. And when she digs the hole for the tree to plant in, she puts the contents of the bucket in the hole, and then she plants, puts in the soil, but puts the tree in that. And I mean, that's a simple way that you're not having to compost, you're not having this, but if you're planting a tree, you can do what she does. And that's in a tiny little property in the middle of Sydney.
In the Ringing Cedars books of Anna Cecilia, when I had a scan of the first 6 books, it was spot on when I read that, she was saying, look, hold the seeds, and with your intention, knowing your body has disease, this distorted information, because we're not all pure, and you plant those seeds in the soil, and then you weed over those seeds, giving the seeds more. You can spit on it too, but you're putting more and more information about your body to the bigger dream you hold of healing your life, healing what has been done, the damage that was done. And these fruits, day after day, as the tree plants grow and you eat them, the plant produces the power to regenerate your cells and detox all that distortion out of your body. And then if you capture those seeds and do it again, and you learn to ignore all the emotion, so that you don't have a single emotion, there's not a single educated thought in your head controlling you anymore. That it still will be there because we're talking English, but it's not ruling you anymore. So you've got to learn how to become detached while you're still in it. Like, we're not of it, but we're still in it. So that's how we deal with it. So it's a peaceful, silent, quiet change, but it's out in the open, blatant. You've got to let the wider community know that you're not a cult, you're not a sect, you're not a violent terrorist, you're not doing anything, you're not in a religion, you're not part of a movement. There is no movement when it comes to this stuff. You're just a co-creative abundance. All you see life is a gift on a do no harm path, and that's it, right? And you just spread that out to inspire other people, because then there's your community immunity. Because when the wider community benefits from the abundance of your creation, and they see that you're not a threat, and you don't take drugs, you do not take drugs, you do not smoke dope, you do not drink alcohol, you don't take booze, you do not do anything to give the Masons a reason to attack you and bring you down before a community to show you that you're just scum and shit. Do not give them access to anything. That's why we don't drink, we don't smoke, we don't take drugs, nothing. Right? Not because we don't want to, because we're scared of this. We don't want to anyway. We have no need for that shit, because it is shit. Right?
What
it is
we
marijuana. Forgive me when I say this. I'm not attacking you or anyone. Marijuana.
Oh, no, I don't take nothing personal. I just smoke weed. That's all I take.
Yeah, I know. But what I'm trying to point out to you, smoking weed is going to give them access to destroy you, because you won't see anywhere in nature where an animal dries up marijuana and smokes them. You see animals sitting around and with bongs and smoking joints. There's nothing in nature that tell you how to do that. We're supposed to eat it, or make oil out of it and rub it into our bodies and smell it, use the scent, but we don't smoke it, because that's not natural, because that becomes distorted, because it's not the way it works. We're supposed to make, we can make natural fibers out of it without doing harm to the plant. So,
and I was just thinking, actually, if you have joined with a group and you're working some land and you've got neighbors around, one of the simplest things you can say, which I think everyone can relate to in this day and age, because it's so hard for anyone to afford a house or anything. You say, hey, we're just a group of people who all wanted to work on the land and grow food, and we couldn't afford to do it by ourselves, so we've joined together. And people will relate to that, partly because they all feel the pinch of trying to afford a house and trying to afford a bit of space in this time, but also because so many people came from immigrants who did just that when they, like a lot of the Greeks, Italians, etc., when they arrived in Australia, you know, 3 families would live in one house, and they would work together and pool their resources and buy another house. It's something that's in our closer history, as it were.
Most of them are
So,
multimillionaires
yeah,
now.
they've done really well. But in
The
terms of
Masons.
in terms of just relating it, getting people who still haven't got their heads around, we can move away from the system. If you put it in those terms of, hey, we just joined together because we couldn't afford to do it by ourselves, instantly you're less threatening. You're not a threatening thing of, hey, we're here to change everything and we want to do something. It's just,
Yeah, see, part of the steps of kingdom, you know, and the mudroom, it's really important that you are shining brightly with that passion. Let the wider community know who you are and what you're all about. Don't worry about what they think about you. Don't worry if they don't give you a smile. Don't worry if they give you a dirty look. Don't worry if they backstab you. It doesn't matter. You've got to let the wider community know who you are, what your motivations, what your intentions are. Because the wider community needs to know you're not a drug addict. You're not a government handout bludger. You're not a booze thing. You're not a sexual deviant. You're there to protect the children from this stuff. You don't live on government handout. This man carries no government handouts, nothing, no Medicare, nothing, and everything. When this man wakes up and goes to bed, this man is a producer and gifting it to the children, gifting it to the family, right? As an abundance. So when there's more of us, and we can create a way of life like this, it's a great gift to the wider communities. So the community has to see you. The community's got to see that you're a non-violent man. You really are a man of peace, but you're not under the Pax Romanas, right? When you evoke that in your community, they will feel threatened if you're being attacked, because they, my God, they're doing it to them. And these people, all they're doing is gifting, and they're helping the wider communities with this charity, this grace, this kindness, all these virtues of love in practice. Well, my God, they're going to do it to them. They're going to do it to me and my family and others. And this is how you evoke the good heart in ways to work towards this dream. So you must be politically active in that way, not the word political, but be active in making sure you use music, you use media, use the internet, and promote the intentions of the kingdom dream, right? Because you're non-violent. You're not a dropout. Just because you don't follow the church doesn't mean that you can't look, the greatest gift, the greatest religion is the one who creates gifts to serve brothers and sisters with. You know, it's the old message of Jesus with the fish and the loaves and all that. That's who we are, but not the way they twisted it. We don't have to go murder animals and give out free meat in T-bone steaks and barbecues, right? We can create abundance in other ways. And that's how
what we need is.
And that's how you inspire the good hearts, and that's how you inspire the gift of all those in the system of will who carry this burden to gift land and to see the dream expand, because they want to see that there's no pedophile. Most people don't want pedophiles amongst them. Most people not want breaking and entering. Most people want community immunity. But when you are the policeman, when you are the doctor, when you are the judge, when you are the jury, when you are all these things as your conscious man, it does no harm.
But there's something that someone just said. Someone just said something, and it's true. People are sometimes jealous, and community garden gets destroyed into city, and I've seen that a lot. There's a lot of vandalism, and kids, or maybe not only children, but
you have no attachment to the community garden, but you remain vigilant and discerning. You've got to be able to suss people out like we do. We don't just let anyone just roam into here. If you don't know who you are, everything you do will be run all over by a bunch of lunatics, because you're still a lunatic yourself. Blame yourself for what happened. You're at fault.
And you know what? You can use events like that as well to inspire that community immunity among people who do care. There was a situation I read about quite some years ago now in a very, very rough part of Sydney, where literally everyone shut themselves in their houses. Everyone was afraid to go out at night. Just the gangs were out at night, and I think someone working for some government thing. He moved in with his family, and he started just inviting people to tea, to come around, have a cup of tea, have a chat, etc. And he started doing this, and gradually what happened was people started to get to know each other a little bit, and it was just a couple of streets were transformed, because then a bunch of the fathers got together and said, right, we're going to patrol the streets at night. And they would walk out in the streets every night, and so the hooligans started staying away because they knew people were going to be there observing them, and the little grannies who were too frightened to go out started being able to go out to the shops again or go out somewhere because they knew that people were watching. The same thing, you get a situation if you start a community garden and it gets vandalized, use that as an absolute tool. Right, we're going to not let anyone stop our community garden. We want our community garden. We want to keep it flourishing. We want to be giving food away. So what are we going to do? Do we form a watch? Do we all take, two of us come, one each take a night a week, and we come and we sit here? You can use those sort of things as a huge tool for forming that community immunity.
We had in Australia a thing called the Cronulla riots, which happened, I don't know, 7 years ago now, 6, whatever it was. And what happened, what brought it about, which involved thousands of Australians who rose up, was the fact that Anglo-Saxons, mainly girls, were being raped by ethnic minorities, particularly Lebanese. And
or just really sexually harassed on the beach. It was a beach area.
Yeah,
so,
but no, there was a lot of, there was rape
well.
and all this. It was really nasty. And there's a region in Sydney, which involves places like Canterbury, Lakemba and all that, where Australians started to target these ethnic minorities that were responsible for these attacks. And so what happened eventually down in Cronulla, which is a beach in the southern part of Sydney, it just happened. Unpremeditated. It just happened. Australians, word of mouth got out because this happened down, and some attacks happened by these minorities on innocent people, and word of mouth spread so quickly, and within hours, hundreds of Australians appeared with cars, with steel bars, all kinds of weapons, and they started going after these people and bashing them. Then they didn't stop there. They drove in large groups to Lakemba and Canterbury in these areas, and they went into these streets and they started smashing doors. This has happened. The police lost control. It became a point where there was going to become military curfew. You don't see this in the media, but there were many Australians in large groups going in the street and smashing every door down, going inside these houses and hunting out these people. They harassed the families who produced these kids who were raping their children. It was unbelievable. Now, the next stage from this, right, it could have blown out to something much, much bigger. The point was the government lost control. The police lost control. The only thing they had left was to bring the army in, the military, a complete military curfew state. It didn't happen, right? It didn't happen. Now, the point was there is a fire in us. But instead of using the violence that way, you've got to learn to stand up. You've got to stand up against these thugs. You've got to stand up to them. And if you have to deal with them, you can tie them up, lock them up if you have to, until they become resolved and they become peaceful. That was the true intention of jails, not the jails we got today, because people are breaking the laws over commercial issues that they can't perform, because that whole thing is discrimination, censorship against everyone, which we talked about in other videos.
It's this, I think everyone does have this fight in them. And this is what can bring them together, is when they can see clearly what the problem is, like the community that was terrorized. They could see that they could do something. They could see the problem. If
Take
you have
matters in your own hand.
If you have a community garden, you can see the problem. Someone has vandalized it. What are we going to do? But this is where the strength of that invisible cage comes in. It's so hard for people to really see clearly where they can direct that passion again about stopping the harm. And that's why we're so choked, so strangled, so stuck, because we haven't got a channel that we can go, okay, we're going to put our energy, we're going to make this right, because it's what's happening is not right. And that's the power of the invisible cage and the power of the covert control. And indeed, that's probably a lot of why they changed from overt to covert control. When you have overt control, there's always a time when the slaves are going to rise up and they're going to rebel. When it's covert, they can't see where to go to rebel.
Well, they can see the fact that they're too busy.
Yeah.
They can see the fact that they need to have some time for them and their family. So they need release and relief with entertainment, joy, recreation, under the pressure of the long hours that mum and dad work to keep a mortgage or to even pay bloody rent and to have just a basic life. So, you know, the distractions are so powerful that the covert methods of the invisible cage keeps everything going and allows the police to keep running the Pax Romanas, because the police are performing the duties of Pax Romanas. They're not really performing the real duties of what originally a policeman was for in a community, like that community area with those two streets. That's what the real police was for, to boot out all these elements. So We have that responsibility to be the community, to be the immune system for our brothers and sisters. This does not mean that we are violent. It has no association with harm. To stand up against harm doers who have a motive, an intention, a malevolent intent, you have every right to confront them. And if you have to fucking kill them because you've got no other choice, because that's what their motive is, you kill them. You don't muck around, because they'll kill you. Right? Now, this doesn't mean it's life and death and you should be passive and, you know, be the Christians to the lions and go to the Colosseum. You can go down that road too and give your life up and not die. That's okay. But you can also take them on and get rid of them if you want to too. You've got free will. Doesn't mean that you're evil, and it doesn't mean that your children have to be like you. Some of us should have been those tribes of man on the land when we saw those UFOs coming on the ships. We should have sent our men out and burnt their ships down. And when they arrived on the shore, she assassinated every single one of them and buried them and used them as compost. And every time they send a ship, we do it to them. We should never be in those tribes that welcomed them, knowing their motive, what their intention was, thinking that we're going to change them. They should have been fucking barbecued, a lot of them. And that's what we
barbecued.
Barbecued, a lot of them.
And composted.
And that's what we need to do now in our local communities. Right? But we don't have to be like them. They play it out in their movies. They play it out in their mind games. They even have their own lackeys who send in. And look, 99% of the whole population of community are non-violent. There's always that little 0.01 to 1% who've been guided and compromised. Some will do terrible things without being manipulated by high-level Masons. But most of these crimes are performed by Masons who capture these lackeys and they give them an opportunity with free sex, free drugs, free benefits. If you do this and this, go and break into it, go and rape that woman, go and bash up that grandfather and that grandmother, go and cause some disturbance in the area, because that's what the Freemasons need to keep them in power. Most of what's happening is done by this. It's all done by this. And all the wars that are waged out everywhere is this, by very few, right? To keep this Pax Romana going, because that's the only way they provide order. It's their order that gives them all the power. While they have the order, everyone is that orderly slave producing the tithing gifts to their masters.
And the best way to control a slave is to keep them reactive. Keep them, and that's where the fear comes in, right? It's like when you're herding sheep. You herd them with dogs to scare the shit out of them so they don't have time to think. So they're reactive, because as soon as they're reactive, you can control a situation if you know how they react. It's no different to how they keep us as slaves. They just control the situation, make us reactive with the fear, with the lackeys going out and causing these disturbances to keep people on the edge of their seats going, oh, what's going to happen next? Oh, this, keep them reactive so they can come in and control them and direct them and divert them wherever they want, wherever they see fit to keep the control going.
Exactly. And that's why the kingdom dream is so important, because with the kingdom dream, you're setting the example how to live without this Pax Romanus or all the psyops that come with it. Because then you're putting it on the face of the police officers and the military and all the people involved in the agencies of Pax Romanus. That you're telling them, look, we've taken responsibility for our own life. Don't you not want us to take responsibility for our lives? Are you saying that we're your slave? Because if we're not taking responsibility, are we your slaves? They can't admit it. Under this covert system, they cannot admit it. Their judges won't admit it. No one will admit it. It's done by default, by proxy. It's very cunning how it's set up. But when you do it out in the open, with many of us together, and you do this to provide community immunity amongst brothers and sisters, and everything we do is to produce abundance, and that's all we live, and we gift it freely to benefit the wider community. So you're producing the highest quality food you could possibly eat, the highest quality liquids you could possibly drink, that nurtures and heals, and you can provide services and benefits that are all free to the wider communities. You start breaking down Pax Romanus everywhere. You break it down, but you must have that passion not to back off. You must persist until you go to your grave, not that it is your death.
Because the most, I think the most powerful thing is if they come onto the land and they say, all right, we're taking this man away, that 100 of you say, okay, we're coming too. And you all go down to the police station. Or they come on the land and they want to shoot half of us, then they shoot half of us, and then another half come up and say, okay, we're taking their places now. Are you going to shoot us too? You know, how long before those holding the guns are going to say, I can't do this?
Yeah.
They have a conscience. They have feelings. They're family people. They can see children playing. They can see this. They can see there's no harm happening. There's only a certain amount of time, but that comes back to that selflessness of, are you prepared to say, hey, I'm going to go all the way, and if this body that I'm living in goes, but that means that others can take my place and carry on the dream, then
yeah, because the choice is, do you want to be a slave or do you want freedom, real freedom? Because that's what it comes down to. So there's your production line of good-hearted men who stand up for this, right? Look, the Freemasons know these things too. They've developed all these skills. That's why you got NATO, why you have United Nations, why you have the 1 million Chinese army, because they go into countries to provide the enforcement, because the people, their own soldiers of their own country, in the end will give up and drop their weapons because they don't want to be killing their own people. They don't want to be killing their own community and detaining them when they know that the whole community is real. This is why the tactics are very cunning, because they always send in the Americans into Afghanistan. They don't use the Afghanistans to destroy Afghanistan. They'll bring the Americans in and bomb it. They'll bring the Americans into Syria and to Libya, or they'll bring the Germans and NATO in. They always try to delocalize something and bring in something greater, because they manipulate the media and they manipulate the story to bring in something bigger, to come in and force change to the local community. So they know this truth of this. That's why you don't have area managers who stay in banks for too long, because they don't want them to build relationship with the local community, because the conscience starts coming into things and people start talking. So they don't like the police who have a conscience. They usually move them around. So everything gets moved around everywhere because they can't let this blossom. But when you know what you're doing with the kingdom, you do this anyway, and you defeat this. Because at some point, the extension of the genocide of a kingdom is at the cost of all of man across earth, if we use the internet and the media to play it out. Because it all comes down to the bottom line. Do we have freedom or do we not? Are we slaves or are we free? Which one are we? Who are we being protected from? If we don't have the problem in the local area, why do we need you in our lives? Can we not take responsibility for our lives? Who says anyone owns the land? Who owns it? Where's the land title office to come forward and say, yes, I am your pharaoh. I am your ruler. I dictate to you what you can and can't do on this land. There is no man who'll come forward. It's a trick. Always is a trick. Everything about their system is a trick within tricks. There's no judge that can rule another man's conscience. They have to deceive you through proxy and by default. They're very cunning how they set these things up. We do it because we're stupid, because we don't remember who we really are. And when you know who you are, that passion lives, right? They come to peace with you because they don't want to validate what you're doing, because they don't want to be seen as the bad guys. The high-level Freemasons run. They run. Then you just got to break down all their lackeys, which is the large forces, all their men and women. Most of them will be mothers and fathers. They will have children. They'll have connections. Don't worry about the transsexual stuff of lesbians and all that in the military and in the police and gay and all that. That's there. But they have good hearts too, in spite of all that sexual stuff that's been done to them since they were in the womb. There is a good heart. But does the good heart want to live in an invisible cage? Or does the good heart want to live in no longer in a cage for any man? So that comes down to the question.
With what you guys were talking about before with the kingdom, and if people come in and they kill off half of us and another half step up. And you mentioned this once before too, Arthur, about how when the good-hearted actually have the blood on their hands and they can see it, that's all of a sudden, that's like a holy fuck, what am I doing?
Exactly.
That's that big awakening for a big group of these people who are deep within the shit of the system, who almost immediately will, if you want to think of sides, will switch sides, because now they have blood in their hands and they are fully responsible for it, and they will not accept it because their good hearts are screaming out, be like, what are you doing? You can't accept this. And then they'll probably be that other half of the group that come and take the place of
some of us have to sacrifice everything,
because they want to be responsible for it now.
Exactly. So some of us have to sacrifice everything. And that was the true message of the man on the cross. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do. He was prepared to sacrifice his whole fucking life just to prove this point, to inspire the local community. What are we doing killing our own? when the man's a man of peace, right? So it doesn't mean that we have to become martyrs. It's not about that. It's having, like I say to my daughter, this man refuses to live in an invisible cage. This man is no one's slave. No one will ever have me as their slave. And that is the battle of the oppression that was brought on this man since in the womb of my mother. So being the man that this man is now doesn't mean that I'm a man of war, that I'm a man of anti-peace or anti-violence. It's just simply no. Use that no powerfully. No, and push back. No, I am not your fucking slave. I am not under your Pax Romanus. Push them out of the lands where they are in. Push them off the shores of this land. Fuck all their passports and visas off. Fuck it all off. They didn't come with passports and visas. They
Stay
came with
far
nothing.
away from them.
They came with lies.
Yeah.
Bring them all down. And you do it on the land where you live. Watch out for all the intel operatives all working around. A lot of younger people, like Campbell Dawson in the region where we are. He's intel. They lied to you. They hijacked the Ringing Cedars movement. They hijacked the space of love. And they run the matches. But they all want the system. They want to keep everyone under Pax Romanus. So it'll be a peace treaty under Pax Romanus that gives everyone access to land again. But everyone will be a fucking slave. Watch out. They're cunning. You've got to be smarter than this. Much smarter than all of this. Much, much smarter. Watch out for Sasha Stone. Watch out for all these lies. They're everywhere. Alex Jones, Jeff Rents. Watch out for these people because they all want Pax Romanus. They will not. They will be assassinated if they went against Pax Romanus. Right?
Yeah.
There are thousands of these lies. They come as Germans. They come as Greeks. They come as Italians. They come as Australians. Watch out for the Max Eigens. He wants Pax Romanus. He wants everyone to have their own community, to grow their own food and all be good people following the virtues of love. But he wants Pax Romanus. He will not destroy Pax Romanus because he's answerable to his fucking master. He's got a master. Hello, Max.
That's great.
It's not a joke. These are our brothers. They've just been misguided. They've been twisted. David Icke wants Pax Romanus. I'm not joking. There's thousands of them. Michael Tellinger with his Ubuntu. He wants Pax Romanus to remain. Any of them want to take me on a debate? Do it. They won't. They run. They run. Right?
Right.
We know who we are. We know we know exactly how to simplify. Doesn't mean we're better, but that is what we do. We sacrifice everything for the greater good of the wider communities. Have the guts to get out there and spread that light, the true light, the living light, not the illuminated bullshit that we've mentioned in all these videos going back over the last couple of months.
Wow. Thank you again for coming on for this one. Another one. Thank you, Scott. Do you have anything to add before we I press stop broadcast?
Really been summed up pretty good. I got nothing really to add.
I think we've said it all. It's up to us to, design our life, design our own life. The whole thing is by design. It's by design that we're enslaved and that we're in a cage. So we can also design our own life to break away from that cage and live our dreams. Me, that's what I say all the time. Rise and shine. Live your dreams. You have one life to live. Focus on bringing something that's worthwhile for you, for your family, for the benefit of us all, with no harm attached to this. Just the love for life. Rise and shine. Speak your mind. Break the walls to yourself. Break the cage open. Break free. Speak to the world. The world is waiting for you is waiting to hear you. That's the thing, the world is waiting for us to hear us. We all have a very unique vibrational signature, and that's important to express it because we can inspire so many people once we start coming out the dark and just express yourself, exactly. Express your power. The power is there. Everything that we need is there. We don't need to seek nothing. That's the thing. We're seeking what? We're seeking what? Lies, and everything is there. Everything is there. That's what I think. That's what I've realized by taking action. But you must take action. Talk is cheap. We know that. But
Exactly.
here we're men and women of action. We all take action in our respective life. So we're not just talking. We're taking action constantly, and that's to inspire. I think it's the world will be changed by our example. My opinion on things doesn't really matter. And anyway, people don't really remember what we say. It's the way we make them feel and the way we inspire each other and each one to each one and put the ego aside and all the nonsense. And we got to go back to the love for life.
Exactly. Just remember that no man is master of another man, which means
Exactly.
don't let another man's dream be inside your head ruling you. Watch out for these alphabet thoughts dictating your movements. You've got to learn to recognize them and detach from them while you accelerate, so you expand your passion for the man you really are. And be that. You're not answerable to anyone. You know
everything, you know, Arthur, everything in nature expands constantly. It's just us. We're on pause. We're stuck in a cage. It's time to break free and expand like nature does. Boom! We're out. We'll be back next week.